so we're now, I mean, we've run ever so slightly over time, but that is true Campfire fashion. But it brings us to our last segment of the show, which is our live Q&A. Hopefully everyone's kind of had a chance to think about the questions that they want to submit. I know we've had some in the chat, but what's usually nice is if everyone kind of unmutes and you can put your questions live to Dan yourself. You don't need me to read them out for you. We also have the pleasure of having Jessica Rasmussen here for our live Q&A as well. So if anyone has any questions for her, you can also put those to Jessica. So did anyone, I have questions here that have been submitted, but did anybody want to just kind of unmute, raise a digital hand and put their question to Dan themselves? Yeah. Lewis, go right ahead.
Oh, thanks very much indeed. That's very kind. Yeah, hi Dan and everyone. A great show. Really enjoyed it today. Dan, you come across to me as an optimist, which I am myself. But today we had the news that 1.5 degrees is going to be with us in the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Do you still think that we can do it? That we can turn around climate change before it becomes a catastrophic event?
Well, Lewis, thank you for that question. I was just reading it, so I was going to respond to you in any of it. You put it into chat as well. Very good point. Are we going to be? Climate change is like dealing with a massive, great big tank of freight going into a port, and you've got to make decisions now. CO2 takes 50. The CO2 we're creating by having this Campfire event now will not be a problem for the next 5 to 10 years. It'll take 50 years to be up in the most radiative forcing, as they call it, and another 50 years to get reabsorbed by existing forestry and phytoplankton and natural systems. So the answer is actually no. We can't stop this catastrophic event that's happening, but what we can do is mitigate it. The little actions we take now are like fulcrums. So the further in the future. So this is why everybody's empowered, because the tiny things that everybody does collectively add up. So let's all get together and do positive stuff. But the answer is that we're in for a rough ride, but the faster we act, the better.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. Thanks.
Amazing. Does anybody else want to put a question to Dan live in front of everyone else? Hold on, let me just... Do we have too many participants live on my screen?
I can.
Go on, Nick.
Hello, Dan. It's
hello. Hi.
Oops. Do you want to go first, Kath?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, it's been fascinating to hear the chat. So thank you. I mean, it's certainly something I thought about before and mentioned in different conversations about the kind of need to place an economic value on nature and to kind of think in a more forward and long-term way as well about the future and capacity of our own energy, of resources, etc. So I wondered, like, from your kind of experience and career and the evolution of the term as well of carbon neutral, or would you recoin the fundamental phrase and movement behind your work as that? How would you understand it and how do you define it today?
Yeah,
encompassing everything you've learned.
Thank you, Kath. I love your glasses. Very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, listen, I think if people remember, carbon neutral first came up in '88. It took till other people said it back in '94, '95 before it kind of went zeitgeist. I never liked the term to begin with, and there was a lot wrong with it. Offset, carbon neutral. It became a movement. And it was very cool when it got going. I mean, everybody else was using it. I thought, well, okay, but it was never the right word. James Cameron and I went into that in some detail earlier. So retooling and going back again and putting value on nature is a very important thing, but it's a question of the efficacy of how you do it. There's a thing called like a benefit corporation, a B Corp. whereby its obligation in its memorandum and articles aren't necessarily just fiduciary duty, meaning it's obligated to shareholders only, but its obligation is to the environment, the customer, and the stakeholder. The organization that I'm working with now is registering as a benefit corporation. I think, Future Forests, the organization I started, I actually tried to form it as a charity, and the Charity Commission turned me down because they said I was giving away the assets of the charity by planting trees on somebody else's land. So I thought, I better do a business. So, it's been one hell of a journey, but pricing carbon and pricing environmental impact can be done ethically. Distributed ledger, or some people, the hip phrase is blockchain. If you've got open source distributed ledger technology where you can see where money's going and you can see financial services working as a financial service, there's nothing wrong with making money. The issue is the pricing can be opaque. And that's what's really important, is that you've got efficacy, you've got good structure, you've got due diligence, you've got reputational risk management, you've got all those things in place in order to make the things work properly.
Yeah, I was just curious if you're knowledgeable about it at all, but do you think the agricultural system will ever be optimized enough to the point where countries like America aren't putting 40% of produced food into a landfill, where there isn't huge amount of carbon emissions from things like combine harvesters and tractors, creating huge amounts of gases into the atmosphere and damaging it?
Well, yeah, absolutely. It needs regulation. It needs careful thought. But the agricultural system, I'll give you an example. Prairie land in America, and the Russian steppes, but prairie land has got around 40 to 50 tons of carbon per hectare within it. And when it's intensively managed for intensive agriculture, it goes down to about 6 or 7 tons. So if you took food out of intensive agricultural production, you just have to do the math. You've got gigatons of carbon can be absorbed by soil. And then the landfill issue is an education issue, and it shows a sickness in our systemic consumption pattern that we can just eat and throw away and not understand. So it takes an educational system of understanding your own actions, and also a retooling of the agricultural system. But there's one interesting point to give you an optimistic idea of how stealable this is with. Imagine all of the carbon dioxide that was created since the Industrial Revolution. Okay, now that's carbon and oxygen. It's up in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide. So if you freed the oxygen and had all the carbon come down onto the planet, how thick would the field of the film of carbon be around the whole planet? I know I don't expect you to answer that. It's a trick question, but a physicist who was investing in carbon gold actually did the math, and it worked out at 1/10 of 1 centimeter.
Really?
I think it's tiny.
Right. So imagine the amount of land that we can use to touch soil. So biochar is a very good way forward. And there are many solutions out there. We've got to use the low hanging fruit before and we have them to hand.
All right. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Does anyone else have any questions for Dan or for Jessica? We have
yeah, I do have one. Sorry, I just have to get my camera on. So, we were talking a bit about NFTs earlier, and the decentralized finance like blockchain, it's been coming under fire for not being very energy efficient recently. So how are you looking to overcome some of these challenges? And is it possible to make progress in this area?
Absolutely. It's a question of who's the energy supplier to the servers that are churning out the NFTs, and there are real problems with the large amount of greenhouse gas that can be created by servers. I think you're looking at the equivalent of the aviation industry just in servers now, and it's increasing. So green tariff, one thing that everybody can do is switch to a green tariff. It costs you no more to buy green electricity than normal. it takes a few minutes to do. So that's a low-hanging fruit solution. So as long as you create demand, I mean, you could say the same thing for electric cars. You know, oh my God, all the electric cars are going to be pulling all this energy out of coal-fired power stations. It's going to create loads of global warming. The answer to that is that the math doesn't stack up. When you switch to renewable energy as the energy supply to an NFT generating server, that's how you resolve that problem.
Yeah, nice, fair enough. Good one.
Can I just interject us there? I think we need to be very careful not to put everything into one basket. There's a whole new generation of distributed ledger technologies that are now emerging, which are very, very low carbon, low energy, low cost systems, which are built upon a set of platforms entirely different from the usual blockchain association with Bitcoin. So one of those is Hedera Hashgraph, and I think you need to sort of watch that space. And I'm working with the Carbon Free group, and we're helping to deploy that into the marketplace. You've also talked about the issue of how to get new systems of valuation and actual deployment. What do we actually do in the agricultural sector? So again, we've come up with some very interesting ideas, and we're all working with 2 farms here in the southeast of England to actually deploy a whole new approach to what to do in the agricultural sector. So might be very interested to talk to yourself and Jessica about that. And Dan, just for your interest, I'm a very, very close and old friend of Simon Bell's.
Oh my God, the guy I went to school with, who's just across the road.
Amazing.
Can I ask Jessica a question, please?
Yeah, please.
Jessica, hi. So I love the principles and profit piece of Two Magnolia, and it caught our eyes because we work with lots of VCs, and Brian, we do lots of stuff in blockchain and all these kind of amazing tech. Jessica, how much of this should be a legislative piece of incentivization for either tax rebate or forcing funding from either state funding or from investment bodies into sustainable funds like yourselves? At the moment, it's very discretionary. We have some tax relief stuff. Doesn't this require a much more structural way of looking at our finances, a much more structural way of looking at investment? I'd just like to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. Thank you very much. And thanks, Dan, for having me and everyone. It's great to see everybody today. You know, the energy and passion around this is amazing. So I'm delighted to be involved. I think that one of the things that we have to realize is speed. And I've been very, I've been very interested in what's been written on the chat today, because all the questions and all the summaries and all the general feeling I have with the statements that have been made are, is this really happening? Is it happening sooner than we think? It's happening at speed. What can we do about it? So to answer your question, 100%, it needs to be a blended finance model. So blended finance is a mixture of private and public money forcing the change in companies that are creating solutions. Now, one of the other things that has really struck me about today is success comes from consumers and success comes from changes in habits. So if everybody in this call changed their habit, and I'm not talking about, the sort of plastic bags at supermarkets, because we've done that, which is great, but if we changed our habits in a variety of different ways. So for example, so one of the big debates is about, 1.5 degree warming and 2 degree warming. And how do we keep away from 2 degree warming? And, at least just if we have to deal with 1.5 degree warming, what is the difference of impact that we have to do? And what do we as consumers have to do? Well, we have to increase tree cover by 5 times faster than we're doing today. We have to transition to electric vehicles 22 times faster than we're doing today. We have to ramp up renewables 6 times faster than we're doing today. So who is going to do that? The conduit has to be the financial community being forced by governments, but also by consumers. And I can tell you, one of the things, because we operate in this sort of the entrepreneur complex problem solution space where the real creatives are really working, whether it's music or whatever it might be, We need to sort of focus on those people like Dan and like yourself, and like Brian, to ensure that we, you know, force finance in that direction. And we can only do that if we're incentivized. But we also do that if things are cool. And by the way, Dan has said it from 1988, and I was around, by the way, in 1988. I wasn't very cool. I was like really very uncool, but not as cool as Dan. But in 1988, what happened? It was, if you were cool, that's what you're doing. And frankly, that's what we want our children, you know. So, you know, people who sort of vilify the Greta Thunbergs and the Extinction Rebellions, I mean, that's pathetic. It's pathetic. It's because they're the ones that are speaking on behalf of our children. So we need to do cool things, because if we do cool things, that's what our kids will embrace and value and aspire to. And that's what we will finance, because they're the consumers of the future. So, you know, we kind of have to play that game. And I think there's a whole trick that has been missed. So governments need to become cool, and they need to participate. And we call on them to join us, and not stand in the, you know, in the background. So, you know, we understand the speed, and I think all of the questions and all of the views of people on this call is, it's sort of how quickly do we have to move, and we have to move quickly.
Very good answer. Very good.
Amazing.
I love the whole principles and profit piece, Jessica. Congratulations on 2 Magnolia.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.
Fantastic. So, John, go on. I saw that hand.
Follow-up question to Jessica. So I think it's true that we need to, as consumers, try and drive our governments to make change. I think it was a little bit, I was hopeful with lockdown. I think, as many of us were at the beginning, that we would see a sharp downturn that would sort of prove to incentivize people to make personal changes. But now coming out of it and seeing the tick back up, and actually that the dip sort of in carbon emissions wasn't actually as great as hoped, what are the practical ways beyond just our personal habits? Sorry, in that seeing how little the dip was a bit discouraging in our ability as consumers to make change just through our own habits. What are the ways in which we can force large corporations, the bigger emitters, to make the same changes that, you know, I'm trying to make by going completely green in my personal life?
Well, I think it's very admirable that, I mean, I think every person has to do their bit, and I think that debate is over. So we don't really, you know, I don't want to. That's Dan's space, and I don't really want to touch on it. But if I tell you this statistic, which shocked me yesterday when I was told this, so the burning down, deforestation of the Amazon rainforest in April 2021 was greater than in April 2020. So the burning in the Amazon rainforest, which takes 5% of the entire carbon budget, I mean, it's a massive carbon sink. We need it. In the first 4 months of this year was essentially the same as the first 4 months in 2020. So to your point, nothing has changed. So you might have thought there was a dip. Yeah, we all thought there was a dip. We all saw the pollution, you know, the lovely NASA satellite images of, you know, India and China and etc. But they are burning the Amazon rainforest at a speed that it is not, we are not able to deal with globally. And I remember, I come from a finance background. I had spent 30 years in finance, and it is terrifying. So it is essential that not only do we change our personal habits, but we have to be loud and vocal about this. And, you know, I wish I could have that magic wand to tell you, but people have to vote, and they have to be vocal about what they want. Now, in the UK, actually, the UK is going to cut its carbon budget by the fastest of any of the, you know, large economies, because it's chosen to do so. It's policies. Forget the politics. It's policies. The policies in Brazil are awful. And it's going to impact the entire world. So if people think that we're not going to warm to 1.5 degrees, they're wrong. We are going to warm that much because the carbon sink is being destroyed faster than we can replace it. We have to go faster. So we have to fund people like Dan, and we have to fund people like you who come up with these fantastic ideas to kind of control that, because we can't vote in Brazil. No, but what we can do is we can pay Bolsonaro to stop. I mean, you might think it's unethical. You might think it's not the right thing to do. You might think it's not the right thing to do to interfere in other people's policies or politics. I think, anything that we need to do to stop this and pause before we take it again is fine. And I think Joe Biden actually will come with a solution. He has said, he has warned them and he has told them to stop or else. And I think that, to say we don't, we don't support sort of indigenous Brazilian people because they're poor and we we do want to support them. Stop burning. And then let's find a financial solution. And that's why these boundaries and geographies, it's irrelevant. If we warm by 2 degrees and sea levels rise by, a couple of meters, there's going to be a lot of problems. So I think we just have to all stop being a little bit selfish. That's the way I look at it.
100%. Can I just chime in on something?
Yeah, please do, Dan.
If you've got finite resources in a closed system and you want sustained growth, what's the inevitable outcome? And I think that's the idea of retooling our attitude. What is wealth? What is sustained growth? If we've got sustained growth and it's going to push us over the point where by the businesses that want sustained growth are actually not going to have customers stable enough to sell their products to, it's absolutely crazy. A meter rise in global sea level means that just about every major city in the world is underwater. I mean, you're talking about people having to move and this is happening towards, this is happening over the next 30, 40, 50 years. So this is the fulcrum effect of being able to come up with positive solutions now, retooling our economy. Distributed ledger, if you have a distributed ledger system where you've got the open source of how all the money's flowing, it reduces corruption. You can see with payments for environmental services. That's just one technology fix. If you've got political will, where people actually are legislating for all of these things, it can really solve a lot of problems if we get our act together right now.
Fantastic. So I think we have time for maybe literally one last question, if anybody wants to kind of wrap up the show with the final question.
I will have one question for both Dan and Jess, actually. What is one key takeaway you want the audience to take away with them today from this show? Dan, do you want to go first?
I'll go first and let Dan wrap. Let Dan wrap the show up. So I would one thing that I would like everybody to take away from this is that we're all in this together, and I don't say that as humanity. I mean, I think that's obvious, but from a financial perspective, we there is a genuine need now to solve these problems. And what I would ask is that all of you, don't feel disassociated, because sometimes we think about these problems and we think, wow, they're too big. I can't, if the sea meter if it rises 1 meter, it's not going to affect me. It's 30 years. It is going to affect all of us. So I just ask people to sort of narrow the gap between what you feel you can do, not personally, but sort of globally, with what's actually happening. So an increased knowledge. All it takes every day is one quick Google. What's happening to the Malaysian rainforest? What's happening to, and then once you have armed with that knowledge, then force your banks, force us to fund these solutions, because it's very urgent.
Fantastic. Dan?
Well, the antidote to anxiety is action. I think that's the thing. So I think what I would like everybody to do is plant trees, and they can do that with us or themselves. So if you follow us down, when the app comes out, which is, we're testing it now and it comes out in September, you can sing trees to life by putting your voice into our tracks, paying to do that, and you get a track back and you plant forests. And if you can help support that when we get going, and also help that go viral amongst your friends and family, and get that out, if you follow Chant Live, then that would be a real help for us in order to collectively get some action going. And watch this space, because hopefully there'll be a lot more. But trees is one of the answers.
Amazing. Thank you, Dan. Before we wrap up for the evening, guys, I just want to say a massive thank you to you, Dan, for all of your time, all the time you dedicated to us in the last couple of weeks, and you, Jessica, also for being here today and for taking time for us this evening. The insight has been absolutely amazing, and it's made for a fantastic show. If everyone in the audience wouldn't mind unmuting in classic Campfire fashion, I think
Yeah.
Nice one. For all of our regular Campfire people, look out for an email in the next few days, because we're going to publish a full-length version of tonight's show, so we can look back on the amazing insight from our guests. Also, stay tuned, as next week we're going to communicate in our Campfire Weekly newsletter what we have in store for June's Women in Tech Campfire show, so look out for that as well. Thank you all again for tuning in, and have a wonderful evening.
You all were a wonderful team. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Amazing.
See you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Great job, Jess.
Yeah, great job,
Yeah,
Jess.
great
job, Jessica. All the thank yous, Hayley, Jessica, everyone involved. Oscar, that all up.